Oh my god! I don't
And you said I didn't understand what you were saying.
Look,
yes, you're saying that the story matters.
Look, are you ready to go? Or can we?
Yes. Please don't put any of this in the episode.
No, I'm not.
Except, weirdly, for certain people, Ted Cruz jerking off is actually relevant.
What?
That's Craig Mazin was the guy who made those tweets where it's like, I was Ted Cruz's college roommate and he couldn't stop jacking off.
Is that true?
Yes, that was Craig Mazin.
What the fuck?
Yeah, that was him. He was the guy who made all those tweets that went viral in like 2016, where it was like, I was Ted Cruz's college roommate and he kept jacking off every night.
This is like a script. It's not a game script.
Right.
It's a script.
Fuck the Oscars, you know? Fuck the Oscars! Fuck you!
Because the most subtle nuances of emotions could be seen on screen. With the PlayStation 4, games have now finally reached that stage.
This is the Citizen Game Podcast where actually we just talk about TV like every other asshole.
Yeah, we're just talking about the most like talked about TV show this the last like couple weeks. So yeah, look out for our episodes on fucking Andor and Succession next or whatever.
Hey, well, you know, speaking of Andor, I do feel like my heart is like this show, and among other things, maybe my heart shouldn't be so dry and shriveled and closed off and just expecting every single thing to be terrible, because the show's all right.
Yeah, it's pretty good.
I said before, just like other people said, where it's like, well, what's the point? And actually, well, it, you know, doesn't have to have a point. It can just be an okay TV show.
Yeah, and so there is something interesting in that, I don't know if this is the right... The show does kind of reveal how much of a video game the game still is.
I think I get what you're saying.
Like, there are things... The video game feels so much like a TV show or a movie, but the things they do have to change are because it still does things that only make sense in a video game.
Yeah, and I don't think I'll actually bring up I was talking to you before that I listened to the official HBO podcast with Neil Druckmann and Craig, what was his last name?
Mazin.
Yeah. And it's not actually a very interesting listen because it's basically, we had to make these logical changes to make it a TV show, and that's what we did, and it pretty much worked out.
Yes.
But they were talking about those things that, you know, because you think about, we've got to do something different because this is where it's just you're doing video game bullshit, but there's also the aspect of, in a video game, or in this video game, it's just from Joel and Ellie's perspective.
Right. And that's one of the big things, is the constantly cutting away to other characters. That's most obvious in episode 3, but it happens in every episode.
Okay, before we get too far ahead, I actually want to just go back a bit and just think about what are the video game adaptations that you've personally seen?
All of them. Okay. Super Mario Brothers movie.
Wait, that's not out yet. Oh, you mean the fucking 80s
The old one.
Right, we watched that together. That's right.
Yes, we streamed that together. The old Super Mario Brothers movie. Brilliant cinema. 10 out of 10.
Yeah.
The first 2 seasons of the Castlevania animated series.
Are those good?
They're okay. They're very edgy.
And you've seen Arcane, right?
I've seen Arcane.
Which is a test of how good can a show be while still heavily featuring Imagine Dragons in the soundtrack.
Yeah. It's also like, I've never played League of Legends, to be clear, but from what I understand, I mean, it's not adapting a story in the game. It's more or less adapting like flavor text backstories from the game.
Which is probably like an easier thing.
It's much easier
Yeah,
because you're not trying to take a story written for a video game. You're taking a story written for a character description in a video game.
Which, like, that's why I gotta think, like, the new Super Mario movie, that's gotta be, like, an easy layup, you know, because Illumination can just do their thing, and since Mario isn't, you know what I'm saying? It's
not exactly a story-driven
It's
character.
not a challenging
other
adaptation. You just can do your thing.
I was going to say Sonic.
Yes, which we have both seen.
One of the most successful, like, straight video game adaptations ever.
Financially, right?
Financially, and I mean even artistically, because hang
okay.
on. When I say it is a successful I'm not saying it's artistically successful the way Citizen Kane is artistically successful. What I mean is, as an adaptation of a video game for children where a hedgehog runs fast, they made a pretty good movie for children where a hedgehog runs fast.
Sure.
Like, that's what I mean. Like, it's a Sonic movie. What do you expect?
I think you said it best, which is like we are firmly out of the era of where you can expect these things to just be terrible.
Right. I mean, I've not seen Detective Pikachu.
I have, and it's a perfectly serviceable movie.
Exactly. Just like video game movies can now just, it's not even that they're great. They can just be okay.
Yeah, and because for a while, it's not even, it wasn't really even worth discussing the sort of like esoteric, like, is there a point to adapting a video game? Because they didn't even reach the level of being mildly competent. Because, you know, one of the first video game adaptations that I saw in theaters was the Jake Gyllenhaal Prince of Persia movie.
I saw that too. I forgot. Oh my god, I saw that too. It was terrible.
The last one I watched, I mean, not counting the HBO Last of Us, I watched the Silent Hill movie.
Oh, how was that? I heard mixed things.
Not very good. I can understand why people might have had some, like, mildly positive things to say about it, like in 2006, because there's nothing, like, egregious, and you get to see, you know, all your favorites, all the monsters, which are from Silent Hill 2, which is kind of weird.
Pyramid Head is featured, right?
Yeah, which I thought was kind of distasteful, because
it's
if you played Silent Hill 2, those monsters and their designs, and even the music that they use, is very important to the story of that game, and they just kind of throw it into Silent Hill 1.
Because I've not seen the Silent Hill movie, but it is basically gender flipped in the sense that the mother is looking for the daughter plot of Silent Hill 1.
Yeah, and that doesn't even really matter, because Harry, yeah, it's not like, I mean, that's the other weird thing, is they adapted the first game, which the first game doesn't really have like a good story. That's Silent Hill 2, and it's pretty much completely different. No, I don't think many people were praising the first game for its story. I mean, maybe there were back in the 90s.
Maybe, yeah, but I mean, they were probably praising for like its atmosphere.
Yeah, I mean,
more than
that's
its story.
Right. And I don't know, like, my wife, she saw that as like a kid back in 2006, and like, this is like a scary horror movie. So if you didn't know anything about it, it reached the levels of like, you know, it was all right.
Yeah.
But now we're fucking in the things can actually be good, and
right.
As I was saying earlier, I'm enjoying the TV show, because even though it's like, you're thinking, oh, well, it's just the game without interactive. It's like, no, you got to make a lot more changes, and those changes can be entertaining, and it's okay.
Yeah. So do you want to go through the show linearly, like talk about each episode?
Yeah, I mean,
okay.
The first episode is definitely it's shot for shot in so many places, right, which is fascinating.
It opens with this weird prologue in the 60s, which has this very, like, on-the-nose thing where a scientist is talking about the potential for a new viral pandemic. which was really eye-rolling to me.
Yeah.
Because then you have the other scientists be like, actually, what would be even more fucked up is if there were a fungus. And it's like, so obviously talking directly at the 2023 viewer who just experienced a viral pandemic and being like, but what if it had been this?
I think that they kind of feel like they...
Have to address it.
Well, shit. They did talk about this on the podcast, and it literally was, they were like, we wanted to say, well, imagine if the thing you just experienced was even worse. That's literally, yeah. And
right. But it's so blatantly talking to the audience right now.
Yeah.
That it annoyed me. Like, because, I mean, maybe you feel you have to do that when you're doing a story about a pandemic in a world that just actually lived through one, which was not true when The Last of Us game came out. But still. Yeah. I don't know. But then, after that, the next 30 minutes are slightly expanded in terms of having a little more characters, but pretty much exactly like the game.
Yeah, and I think that's immediately when I realized, I was like, oh, this will be okay. Because when they started expanding, I'm like, these are very natural and very obvious expansions. Right. Like, this is good stuff.
Yeah, like she talks to her neighbors, she goes to get a watch fixed for Joel or whatever. But then when the outbreak happens, it is like not just the events, but even the way it's filmed are clearly trying to invoke the game.
And I mean, that makes sense because that is the most directed part of the game.
Right, because you're in the car looking over Sarah's shoulders as Joel and Tommy are driving the car. And the dialogue is even word for word. Like that whole exchange about how there's a family whose car's broken down. Where he's like, they have kids, so do we. And then he drives past. And so that's the moment when I realized the game was going to try to invoke the look of the show was going to invoke the look of the game. Which it doesn't really do for the rest of the episode, but it does there. And then I think Pedro Pascal is really good in Sarah's death scene.
Yeah, I mean, I got nothing, no complaints about.
Oh no, yeah, Pascal is really good through the whole show, and I think that scene was really where I was like, yeah, this is going to work. Because even though his accent doesn't, I don't know how well the accent works for me, at least in the early episodes.
It's fine. I'm fine with it.
It's fine. I just don't find it as believable as the accent in the game.
Yeah.
I think Troy Baker does a better one. But other than that, his performance is great.
So here's what I want to get to, which is the whole business with what is the guy's name? Robert. And how that's changed and everything. And so obviously it's changed because in the game you need to go and kill some people and get familiar with the guy's...
Okay, I was going to ask who's Robert. The guy who's smuggling batteries.
Yeah, and so I get, and so change is pretty obvious, like why because in the game you need a level and things like that. But
because in the game that the whole section in the QZ with the other smugglers is a learn the combat section. That's why it exists.
I do want to ask is do you think that Joel is softened a bit?
I was actually going to complain about exactly this.
Okay. Yeah, because it's not just that, it's not that we're, removing Joel killing a bunch of people. The fact that I think that it seemed like both Joel and Tess are kind of softened a bit.
Right. Joel and Tess, well, for one, it's interesting. Their relationship is much more overtly romantic than the game.
Yes, and the game
they go into bed, they get in bed together.
Right, because in the game you maybe get a vibe that maybe they fuck every once in a while.
Yeah, but it's
maybe they did at some point.
Yeah, but it's kind of ambiguous. In the show, both here and in the flashback in 3, especially, we get the sense they are just a couple. I think the thing that softens Joel the most in the way that's most sort of thematically a divergence from the game is why he wants the car battery.
Right.
Because he wants the car battery because he's worried about Tommy and is going to go look for him in Utah or wherever he is. And that, I think, is actually a really huge change to his character. Because it means that from the start, Joel cares about someone. He cares about someone so much, he's already planning to leave Boston and go on a cross-country trip. which is kind of weird because it means like Ellie isn't as much of a disruption to his plans.
Yeah, and so is that, do you think that's done a little bit for like logic reasons? Because help me out with this, with the game, do they just stumble upon, because that's the thing, he doesn't know that's his brother's place, right?
In the game he goes to his brother on purpose.
Okay, he does. I couldn't
so
remember.
In the game, if I remember correctly, he's just vaguely is like, I don't know where to take you, you know?
Yeah.
So he's like, my brother used to be a Firefly, he might know. So I'm going to go to my brother, who lives vaguely somewhere in this area. He's not worried about Tommy. He's not looking for Tommy. He's just going to go get Tommy because Tommy's an ex-Firefly and might know where I should take Ellie. Right.
And not actually care because they left on bad terms.
Yeah, no, he says, like, they had a big fight the last time they saw... He says this. She asks, like, why haven't you seen him? Why don't you live with him? And he's like, we had a big fight last time we saw each other. And so he just vaguely... Like, he does not want to see Tommy, except that he has to get rid of Ellie, basically.
So I wasn't even thinking about that, but the other aspects I was thinking about, like I said, with Robert, they kind of do a little telling instead of showing, because you have the part where Tess kind of doesn't want to tell Joel about what happened because of what, they don't get to kill Robert.
No, Robert's killed by the Fireflies.
Yeah, and that's different from just not having like a combat section, because it seemed like that was important to show that how callous they are. It's like, we're just gonna cap a motherfucker, for screwing us over. And the other part was like, a big one is when Joel kills that Fedra guy.
Yeah.
Because that flashback, it frames like his violence as like a trauma response,
right,
to something that happened a long time ago, and everything in the game, all the violence is to show his callousness and how he doesn't give a shit. Yeah, and they were, and I remember them taught in the podcast, the thing that's supposed to show his callousness is him burning that kid at the beginning, where they just throw him into the fire. That's weird.
Oh, really? That's very weird, because
the point that was to show his detachment from what happened, 20 years ago.
That's weird for two reasons. The main one is that's just normalized in this like society, though.
Well, that's why they show Tess struggling with it more,
I guess, but we don't get the sense like that makes Tess abnormal and Joel normal. Was the sense I got, because like that's just a job you do.
Yeah,
burn the bodies of people who were infected. And maybe that's the point. But yeah, and it's also obviously not violent.
But I mean, that's supposed to show his distance from his daughter dying. But so that's why I thought it was weird with him reacting to that Fedra guy.
I was gonna say, isn't the point that he's not distant from it at all?
Yeah,
isn't that the point of him beating the Fedra agent to death?
So that's definitely like I said, it's still like everything's fine, but if there was kind of a nitpicky thing, it seems like it doesn't paint him as callous as he originally was, which is less interesting.
Right, because it makes his whole arc with Ellie make less sense. This is why I especially focus on his brother.
Right.
Is that
he doesn't give a shit about his real family.
Right. It's weird that in the show, he already has someone he cares about enough to do this whole cross-country trip for. And so instead of Ellie being like the person who teaches him to care about people again, and also because he seems to care about Tess more in the show, instead of that, it's just him specifically learning to care about Ellie instead of learning to care about anyone.
Yeah, and I really, and this is skipping ahead to the second episode, but I like in the game when Tess is bit, the thing that she says to him is, like, there's got to be enough here between us that you feel obligated to me. Yeah. Whereas that is way more of just a given in this show.
Yeah, because we see much more of their interaction outside of killing people in the show.
Which honestly, like, yeah, not even bad. This is
Right.
it's because why not mix it up? It's a TV. It's different. It's an adaptation. So
Yeah. Except that they are going to do the same arc with Joel.
yes,
As from everything we've seen, which makes it...
it doesn't
makes
throw
the
it
arc
off. It just
weaker.
makes it a little weird.
Yeah, it makes it somewhat less impactful because it's less of an idea that this guy was totally closed off until Ellie came into his life.
Yeah. I don't think there's much. There's not much to say
Right.
about.
Except
the
I
first
will say about the first episode, surprised me a lot, was how it ended. Specifically, that I assumed that the show was going to be faster paced than it is.
Oh, you thought they were gonna go further?
I thought, yeah, if I was guessing, I would guess the first episode would have ended with Tess's death, which is the end of the second episode.
So it's just funny because the episode was gonna end earlier. Actually,
Really? Is this the podcast?
yeah. So they were gonna end it at. It was either Sarah's death, or yeah, I think it was like Sarah's death. And they had to go further because it's like you need Joel's like mission to get Ellie across, because it's like that is the start of the show. That's what changes everything.
Oh, so it was first episode would be just the prologue.
Right.
Yeah,
And
I
they
can see how that would.
That
work.
doesn't work for TV.
Right, because especially
Because it's just like a conclusive short story if you do that.
Right, it's just a short film. Because like if you don't have him meeting Ellie and going like the first episode of a TV show has to establish the premise of the show.
Yeah, you gotta have Walter White in his underwear.
Yeah, yes, exactly. And if you don't have like having the first episode end with the character's backstory but not his current day, like seeing nothing of the current, like that would be insane. Because like, it's not even post-apocalyptic if you end the first episode there.
So first episode. Oh, the only other interesting thing is that Marlene is the only person who reprises her role from the game.
Oh, really? I did not know that.
Yeah,
That's
and
interesting.
I found it because I was like, that voice sounds really spot on.
Oh, that's interesting. But she's the only one. They didn't cast any of the...
Well, there's something I'll get to that's interesting, but we'll get to it later. But episode 2, you kind of get more into just the changes they made to the zombies.
They have a hive mind now.
Yeah, which is cool.
Which is interesting. Cool. That's a cool mechanical... and then there's an interesting line of dialogue where they make fun of Last of Us 2 almost, where she's like... Where Ellie says, like, are there, like, special mutant ones that throw, like, exploding spores at you or something?
But that's not even making fun of that's just... See, what I was confused about, I thought they were making fun of bloaters, because bloaters throw things at you.
Right.
Which I assume means we weren't going to see a bloater.
Right, but then, of course, we do.
Yeah, so...
But he doesn't throw anything, so...
Because
there are also new special infected in 2 who do that.
The spores aren't a thing.
Right.
Which was done because they they were just like, if it was spores, like, everybody would just die. And they probably didn't want Pedro Pascal wearing, like, a gas mask.
Right. How could you cast Pedro Pascal in a show where you don't see his face?
Yeah.
That's a joke.
No, I think that was the point. I think that was the point.
No, but I'm making a joke about the Mandalorian.
Yeah, I know. I'm just saying that I think that was directly like...
Right, I think
we don't want Pedro
like,
wearing more shit on his face.
We want to be able to see them, which I don't know. Yeah, maybe, logically, if it was airborne, the air would eventually blow it over the
I mean, also,
zones.
spores would probably be... That's an easy video game thing. Probably easier than trying to make that... I mean, I don't fucking know how hard a spores special effect would be, but...
They'd probably have to be digital effects every time.
But I like the tendril mouth kissing thing's pretty awesome.
Yeah. But I was gonna so and then they make a joke about the clickers and we meet the clickers later, and
which is where you get more into like this like you said, not shot for shot, but there's some shots that
there are shots where like so Joel is crouched behind one of the display cases and Ellie is crouched right behind him and it's at their eye level and it's like that is a shot from the game from not just a cutscene, but a gameplay sequence in the game.
Yeah.
And it's like, that's interesting that they're like deliberately evoking what it looks like when you play the game.
But you can do that because that is like, that stuff in the game is like, that's well framed.
Right,
Like,
it's also, it is a video game shot, but it's also, if you never play the game, or you don't play, like, third-person video games, it's also a legible shot in the show. Like, it makes sense. It's not out of place.
Translating that whole action sequence, it's like, that was well done. I don't really have a whole lot to say about it.
I have to say about it is that it succeeded at making the clickers scary, which, while playing the game, they pretty quickly stopped being scary to me. Because in the first game,
they're still scary to me because I suck. So
right in the first game, there's a really cheesy way to get through the clickers, which is you throw a brick and then you throw a Molotov cocktail and you clear the entire room.
Yeah. Well, you know what it is? My last playthrough was like on like the survivor difficulty or whatever. So that's probably why I didn't have as many Molotovs. But no, and it's a great design. And
yeah, it looks good. I mean, it's basically exactly the design from the games, and that was a good design in the game.
And that whole episode is pretty much just them going through. And it is interesting that they changed the Tess's sacrifice to being zombies.
Right. They remove all of the human antagonists in this episode from the game.
Which made me think about, it's like, well, why would Fedra be out here anyways?
Well, I mean, it would make sense if they're trying to... No, there's a reason Fedra's out there. It's to kill the Fireflies.
Yeah, I guess, but...
Because Fedra is at war. We see in the first episode, the Fireflies are doing, like, assassination on Fedra officers. They would want to hunt them down. That would make sense. But, yeah, it's interesting that they get there. And I almost feel like this is where, and this continues in the third episode, where they're trying to surprise people who've played the games. In this case, it's kind of weird because the conclusion is the exact same, which is that the Fireflies are all dead, and they have to take, and Tess dies, and Joel has to take Ellie out.
But that was Tess's sacrifice.
It's
the
made
mix-up
a lot more,
was compelling.
Right. It's made a lot more sort of romantic than it is in the game.
Yes.
With the whole blowing herself up and taking out all the zombies instead of she just like runs out and fires like twice and then gets shot by Fedra.
Yeah, but all of that's like. That's fine because it's the chain. Like an explosion fits taking out a bunch of zombie, like a suicide thing, and like the zombies are there because this is like a zombie-filled episode. Because in the game, you actually have way more beats switching between zombies and humans, and
right.
And it's I don't know how many more times I can say these are just smart. Make sense. These changes all make perfect sense.
Right, and then we get to the third episode. Then, if you want to talk about that, which is. By far the biggest divergence from the game so far.
I read a bit about why this was done, which was essentially, of course, in the game, you meet Bill and the traps and everything, and that's a very video game, and they have to go get an engine, and they explicitly wanted, because there's way more time in a game, obviously, between the tragedy of Tess and you meeting Bill. So they didn't want just more tragedy pile, because it would get a bit, the pacing's just different. So they wanted to rewrite it in a way that was hopeful, but still reinforced all the themes of the show. And I gotta say, I cried like a little bitch at this episode. It got to me.
It got to me a little too. I'll admit that. But it got to me, but it felt some of them felt like cheap shots. They hit, but they felt like cheap shots.
I think what feels, I mean maybe cheap is the wrong word, is, so remember when I was talking about The Last of Us 2, how the Tommy's whole village and everything, it's like, this is amazing. This is better than modern American life.
Right. So our friend Steve was at a talk given by Slovenian philosopher Slavoj Žižek. And he cited The Last of Us Episode 3 in that talk. This is Steve relaying this to me, obviously, as an example of a fake dystopia.
Yes,
where it's actually, you want this. It's actually a utopia. And
you
it's
get
just
to
pretending
have
it's
a
dystopia.
more dignified death than most Americans right now.
You get to have more material comfort than a lot of Americans get right now.
Right.
In terms of, like, you get, like, to eat the best food every night. You get to go to every store and take whatever the fuck you want. You get to have your generator and you get to have a whole neighborhood to yourself.
Yeah, and it's what was interesting is they talked a little bit about, so there's that line where Bill says when he drinks the wine, he says this isn't like the tragic suicide at the end of the play, which is directly quoting some other play that was, about a gay man. But basically the point was including that it's like, we want to make it explicit that this is not a tragic suicide of a gay character. And
of course not. But
yeah,
wait,
and that's the thing. That's the thing. Is like I understand, really wanting to make that not clear, not like if you're a screenwriter, not fall into, problematic tropes, but it's like it's so explicitly clear already. It's like, no, this is awesome. This is amazing. I would love to die this way. Everybody would love to die this way.
Yeah, is that really that much more responsible to be like, no, this gay guy's killing himself and it's fucking great. It's good. It's good what he's doing. Like,
well, I just mean, like, it's like you shouldn't have even been worried because, like, anybody could see this and like this is obviously the way you want to go.
If anything, that's almost the more questionable part. I mean, is how fucking positively it's portrayed.
Yeah.
Like, that's one thing I didn't
Wait. What do you mean by questionable?
In terms of, like, worried about certain implications coming through.
Oh, see, I'm not even... there's a lot of scenarios where... Because the USA is not a country with great, like... I'm pretty fucking pro-assisted suicide.
Sure.
And so, yeah, like, there's a lot of scenarios where you'll wind up, drowning on your own fluids when you probably could have been better served at taking your life into your own hand. If you're, like, 85, So,
I'm not going to endorse killing yourself just because you turned 85.
I'm endorsing if you feel like there's nothing more for you and you want to... And you're going to die soon anyway because maybe you have some terminal illness or something. You know what?
But does Bill have a terminal illness?
No, he's just old.
No, he doesn't. He's just old and he's like, I don't want to live without you.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know. Like, because this is also a big surprise people who played the games thing.
Yeah. Because
you would expect it to end with the lead up to Frank leaving Bill and then getting infected and then killing himself and writing that letter about how he hates him.
Yeah.
And I don't know. I almost feel like they're like, we don't want it to be too sad. We don't want to bum the audience out because Tess just died. And that it sort of feels symptomatic of a problem I'm going to have with the next two episodes when we talk about them, which is that the show feels like it pulls its punches.
Right.
It's
one to say. I think the episode is fine by itself, but in the context of some of the other things, it gives an overall sense of not willing to be as
just commit to its vision of like a grim world.
Yeah.
Of like this is dark. Like when fucking because the letter he writes at the end, Bill, when he says like, I was happy when everybody died. And it almost feels like the episode is happy that everybody died.
That's a...
like... And maybe that's because the episode is from Bill's perspective. But it kind of feels like the episode agrees with him that they're also happy everybody died.
Yeah, I kind of get what you're saying.
Like, obviously, because like this dystopian utopia thing is obviously not true of the first two episodes. The depiction of Boston is insanely bleak. You got guys wearing Gore Lieberman t-shirts. Did you see that?
No, I did not.
There's a guy in one of the shots where they're.
Oh, wait. Yes, I did see that.
Who's
I know,
wearing
yeah,
a gore because the world ended in 2003.
Right.
So a ton of them. There's just. I wish they'd lean more into that. I saw someone be like, "There should be a huge Pirates of the Caribbean poster in the hotel they go to."
But I don't want to be like I said in The Last of Us 2. That's also just the overall vibe of. What am I trying to say? I'm trying to say that The Last of Us already kind of had that bend of positivity in the sense of you could carve out a better life than you probably could have ever had. As opposed, I like making the comparison between. I'm
going to dispute that slightly.
I'm thinking mostly of The Last of Us 2 with
right, and I'm going to dispute that because I don't think that's
Hold on, just 1 second. I'm thinking about this in comparison to a post-apocalyptic like the Metro games.
I guess
it's very explicit that the old world sucked, but it was better than what we have now because we still have all the same bullshit.
But we just have a lower material standard.
Yeah, and now we don't have sunlight, and we have to make all our vodka from mushrooms.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't know how much time the village in Last of Us 2 is actually strictly better than a life you would live in
I'm
America
probably
now.
just bringing a lot of personal where I personally
think you are.
would yes, I absolutely would. I'd rather be out checking doing my checkpoints on a horse while getting away from zombie. Listen, they have sandwiches, okay?
They do have sandwiches.
They have fucking sandwiches, so it can't be that bad.
Yeah, I don't know. I think you're projecting a little bit onto what the game is
I
actually
absolutely
portraying.
am. I fully admit it.
Yeah, because I don't think that's. I mean, it is the more fake dystopian, even than the Tommy's Village. And this is deliberate in the theming of Last of Us 2. Is the fucking farm they moved to.
Yeah.
But that's deliberately supposed to be the good thing you want to keep.
That's true.
on purpose. Thematically, it's the good thing that Ellie loses by leaving. But this episode, is totally fake dystopia. Totally actually thinks it's good.
I mean, for fuck's sake, Bill... I mean, explicitly would have not met another person.
No, he says his life is better.
Yeah.
He says it's good that everyone died. But that's because, and I don't know, but I think the episode, because he's admitting that as I'm a bad person for thinking this. He's I was happy when everybody died, but also the episode thinks that. Yeah, and the episode is also, I can see why it would be off-putting to some viewers because it is an episode that does not advance the main plot at all.
Right.
It's an episode that's not about the main characters, which is fine. But I can see how that might be off-putting.
Because even though it's surprising for people who've played the game,
right?
I gotta feel if you're a viewer, it's just why are we focusing on these people so much?
I feel if you haven't played the game, it's just a totally self-contained and seemingly random story.
But it was good, and
I mean, it was
still
okay.
It still got to. It doesn't. They talk about cheap shots. They used on the Nature of Daylight, which is that's that song that plays at Arrival. Have you ever seen that movie?
No.
But a very emotional piece of it. I mean, it's not cheating. That music wasn't written for Arrival. But it is a very emotional, moving piece of music that's yep, we're just going to plop that in there and it will naturally pull your heartstrings, which it does.
Yes.
All right, so on to episode 4, which the thing I was going to talk to you, which was, so I forget the lady's name. What's her name? But she's in charge of all the...
Hang on. Kathleen.
Yeah, so Kathleen, her second command, that is the voice of Tommy in the games.
Oh, that's the guy with the big beard?
Yes.
Huh, that's interesting. So he's not reprising the role, but they did give him a role.
Yeah, so you know what? Say what you will about those HBO companion podcasts, but sometimes you get some good trivia.
I mean, we could have figured this out if we just went on IMDb.
Well, but yeah, so of course in the game it's the Pittsburgh is a big heavy action scene.
Right, and so it's been moved to Kansas City for one. Why? I think it's to make it happen further from Boston.
It was also shooting. It was also
it's
because
cheaper to shoot in Kansas City.
Well, they didn't shoot in Kansas City. It's where they were like shooting somewhere in Canada, and where it was easier to make wherever they were shooting look like Kansas City.
Then Pittsburgh. That makes sense.
Yeah, I mean Kansas City is not a very distinct city,
right?
So
much less so than Pittsburgh. Yeah.
Yeah,
I guess that makes sense.
It doesn't matter, and they literally said that on the podcast. Like that's we changed it, and it's a pretty surface level change.
Right. It's meaningless other than geographic, where which city this happens in. But so I'm gonna bitch about this for a while.
Okay.
So they basically the episode until they reach, I think there's camping and they talk or whatever, and the episode. And then they get to Kansas City, and it plays out pretty much like it does in the game, where a guy runs out and pretends to be wounded, and then Joel's like, he's not hurt. He doesn't literally say the line from the game, but he says, like, he's not hurt. He drives, they crash, blah, blah, blah.
And they combine the beats. They combine the beats of Ellie first shooting a guy.
Right, with the gunfight in the convenience store. Yeah. Which makes sense, because those are both things that happen in the Pittsburgh sequence in the game.
Yeah.
So it just totally makes sense. She shoots that guy, and then you get this interesting thing where the guy starts like begging for his life, and he's like, "We could just leave. We don't have to blah blah blah." And then Joel kills him, right?
Yeah.
And Ellie's like hiding, and she just hears Joel killing him. And the guy's like pretty young. Hang on, hang on. I have
all right.
And like that is so clear about what it's trying to do. It's trying to be like, hey, the people you kill, they're people too. There's moral complexity. They're just trying to survive. And that will become relevant later. Go on.
Oh, I was just going to say, if there's something I think is very well done with Bella Ramsey's performance and just the overall treatment of Ellie, I think what they capture very well is, she shoots that guy, and she doesn't feel great about it, but they strike this really good balance of, obviously that would like fuck you up a little bit, but she also wants to feel powerful enough to defend herself.
Yeah.
And she both, is kind of scared of that whole situation, but also does want to be like Joel, where she can do the, and I just think that they do a good job with that by balancing those things.
Yeah. And I am going to bitch about plot holes.
Okay.
I'm sorry to do this, but I couldn't stop thinking about this. And I thought maybe the fifth episode would explain this, but it doesn't. So Joel and Ellie get in the gunfight. They kill those three guys. Then we meet Kathleen interrogating like a doctor.
Yeah.
Who we learn more about later. But then she comes out, she finds out that, three of the people have been killed. And they're like discussing why. Why did the outsiders attack them? They must have been mercenaries hired by the guy, Henry, right? And I don't understand. Don't you guys kill and rob everyone who comes into the city? Or were those three guys just doing that on their own? Because isn't that what, of course the outsiders attack them. You kill everyone who comes here, right? Or maybe not. Here's the thing. The show kept the pretend to be wounded ambush sequence from the game exactly. But then they completely rewrote everything else in the Pittsburgh / Kansas City sequence in a way that made that introduction make no sense. Because because in Pittsburgh, Fedra was overthrown a long time ago.
And what's left are just fucking raiders.
They have completely degenerated into just bandits. That's it. They have no political authority. They have no real goals other than kill and rob everyone who comes in here. That is not true in Kansas City in the show. In Kansas City, Fedra only fell 10 days ago. But they kept the introduction, because it's an iconic scene, they kept it. Even though, and that, like, is the moment where the over-faithfulness to the game becomes a problem.
And in all, you know, and now we're just talking about the big thing, which is the whole sequence, you know, in the game, they're just assholes,
murderers.
Yes, so that
all they want to do is rob and kill you.
Yes, and so you can shoot them, and it's not a big deal,
right?
And that's all fine, and you know it's
And Henry and Sam are just random people who also got caught in the same trap,
right? And so
like they don't care
obviously
about Henry and Sam.
Yeah, and you definitely would feel the need to change that for TV. But the way they went about changing it is interesting.
So I saw someone say that this feels very textbook screenwriting, and that they weren't surprised that Craig Mazin has a podcast where he teaches intro to screenwriting. Because two things, and I thought this, which is one, making Joel want to find Tommy at the start of the show, rather than having it be coincidence that he meets Ellie.
Yeah.
That's screenwriting 101. Make characters motivated. Does it make sense thematically? Maybe not, but he's motivated. That's good. Motivation is good. Textbook screenwriting says you can't have your enemies be faceless and not be characterized. But, like, you can. You could.
You could just understand it's just the TV urge coming
right,
through.
It's the drive of maybe a TV writer, but there's nothing stopping you from keeping it in Ellie and Joel's perspective. Keeping it, they don't know these people, these are just people trying to kill us. Like, there's nothing stopping you from doing that, they just feel like they should.
And what you lose is kind of, that section feels more, I guess, like The Road. And it's just like, everything is just awful, and the people that we encounter are just baby eaters. Yeah.
Yes, and the fact that, like, it keeps us in Ellie and Joel's perspective. Maybe these people do have more complex shit going on, but they don't know that, right? Because we're in Joel's perspective. He doesn't know these people.
And of course, this goes, the everything added on to this group has the very obvious, like, thematic intention, especially with the Sam stuff, Sam did a thing. He did a bad thing because he cares about his little brother. And that's how they work in his history with this group, is something to reinforce the main themes and parallel Joel more. And so, like, it all works on a very obvious surface level.
Just a correction.
Yeah.
Henry is the older brother.
Did I say Sam?
You said Sam. Henry did it to save Sam.
Right. And it's like, that it's very obvious what they're doing, but I mean, you know, all this would be fine, but now we have to talk about the elephant in the room, which is, like, Kathleen and the whole past and what people have called the liberal bad guy. You know, it's like, well, the bad guy is actually right here, so we need to make them murder puppies to make them wrong.
And here's the thing. Okay, so yeah, Craig Mazin's like a liberal. He was a Hillary Clinton booster or whatever. He supported the Iraq War. I don't give a fuck. I mean, I give a fuck if I was his friend or something. But, like, if you're not going to watch a TV show or read a book or read a comic or play a video game because it's written by a liberal, I have bad news for you about, like, all American mass media. The problem here is the way this political message manifests in making a character who's a badly written character. Because this goes back to the whole thing where you have the raider be like, no, don't kill me. To try to make it morally complex, right?
Yeah.
And then Kathleen, every single scene ends with Kathleen looking at the camera and screaming, "I'm crazy." Every scene focusing on her, even the ones that start out like, we're going to make her kind of sympathetic, ends with, "No, I'm fucking evil." her first scene ends with her having that whole conversation with the doctor where she puts a gun to his head but doesn't shoot him, and then it just ends with her killing him, walking back into the prison and killing him.
Yeah.
Because it's like, no, like the show is actively scared of moral complexity in this character specifically.
Yeah, it doesn't, like, if you wanted to make it morally complex, why wouldn't you just, why not go further? Yeah, make her a good person. Who
is like, but no, she is just, like, literally every scene centered on her ends just reinforcing the same thing, that she is a monster. Like, there's no moral complexity to her at all. And it's like, the show is with the shootout in the convenience store is basically trying to trick you into thinking it's morally complex, but is really scared of actually doing it.
I mean, she even, like, talk about, like, TV bullshit, but her end of her literally being killed by a child, because she was ostriching and sticking her head in the sand and avoiding the real problem of the zombies, and she gets a Schadenfreude, you know?
Well, it's even more than that, because the absurd height when she confronts Henry, and someone pointed out on Twitter, but they are right. She confronts Henry at the end of episode 5.
Yeah.
You know, where he comes out and he says, just let Sam go. You can have whatever. What is she doesn't say to him, hey, you fucking killed my brother. She doesn't bring up the bad things Henry did. What she says is like, it's good when kids die. I think it's actually good for sick kids to die. It's
Children
like
die all the time.
Yeah, like, it's insane. Makes no sense as something this character would say. Because if that's your fucking attitude, okay, well, your brother also died. And some people die. And also, and this is another me bitching, her brother, like, the way they talk about him is ridiculous. Because they're like, he didn't want you to take revenge. He didn't, like, he was like, you know, live and let live, right? That's how they describe him. And it's like, how is his, like, urban guerrilla resistance going then? Because I wouldn't think a live and let live guy would be leading any sort of resistance movement.
Well, but that's like, also just a weird thing of, so when they have that conversation, and her second is basically, he says, your brother didn't actually get shit done.
Right.
But her getting shit done is like being stupid and being like a practical person, like, they showed her being like just kind of stupid, where it's like they should show her be practical to the point where she comes across as
it's not
cold.
It's not callous rationality. She's just insane.
Yeah, she's just being stupid.
Right, she's just like, and this is where it comes off like, this is where people are like, this show kind of thinks Fedra's better than her, because it clearly thinks Fedra was being like cruel but rational, whereas she's like. And I think Mazin said, did he say this in the podcast, or is this a misattributed quote, where he's like, what if the reign of terror during the French Revolution was led by a kindergarten teacher?
He said that in the podcast.
Right.
Which,
so, okay.
You know what? I can't, like, as a performance, just her performance, like, I think it's actually an okay idea.
Right. Craig Mazin thinks the reign of terror happened because people were angry. Which is kind
of there's the line. There's the when you rape and torture people, whatever, that's what they're gonna do to you.
Right. But the reign of terror happened primarily because they were trying to remove threats to the new revolutionary power. Kathleen does not believe anyone's a threat. She just wants to kill people. Like, there's no point where she has even a rational thing of like, I kill people because they could threaten my power.
Yeah.
Which is evil, but at least makes sense. As a thought that a human being would have. It's just, I think it's good when kids die, and I like killing people.
Right.
But it also, because, like, the show isn't, but, okay, so she's just evil. Like, the villains of this arc are not actually more complex than the Pittsburgh Raiders from the game. There's just given more screen time to, like, oh, hey, maybe she's sympathetic, and then every ends with hitting you with a hammer that says no. No, she's evil. No. That's what annoys me. It's not the politics. It's the fact that it feels like really lazy writing that is like scared of it's scared of having the themes it pretends to have.
It would have been more interesting if you had just kept them as, like...
Faceless.
Well, maybe, but you can have them just be evil, bad people, and you still try and find the humanity in them.
Right, but instead it's like pretending we're giving humanity to them and then saying no.
Yeah, it
She's
is.
evil.
Okay, so here's a bit of a tangent. Because I do think this series has, like, a little bit of a problem with, or at least maybe the problem's more introduced in The Last of Us 2, of, like, when we're trying to inject humanity and moral complexity into people. Because, like I said, I think the first game is kind of perfect when it comes to trying to take a action story where you kill 100 men seriously. Because at this point, they're faceless monsters. And it's not till the end. And in the podcast, Craig specifically says, in a game, you don't want to feel too bad about killing people. So, but in a show, we're going to really lean into when Ellie shoots that guy.
Yeah.
And I find that interesting because The Last of Us 2 is obviously trying to go harder and make you feel a little bit more uncomfortable with its violence, which is why it gets a little inconsistent, because like I said on that episode, so we're going to recognize the humanity of just your random NPCs, but we're also still going to have like slavers at the end, so you can have that consequence-free killing because Ellie actually needs to feel bad about killing someone who matters.
Right.
So it's just like a interesting thing with both the show and the second game where it seems a little confused about when we're actually like injecting humanity into
and
these
speaking
bad...
of the second game, I want to talk about, because the second game has a very similar setup in Seattle, the way it portrays Seattle, to the way Kansas City is portrayed here, in terms of the aftermath of a successful overthrow of Fedra.
Right.
And I think it's kind of interesting to compare Isaac, the leader of the Wolves, the WLF in that game, to Kathleen here, because like Isaac ultimately is an antagonist.
Yeah.
Even when you're playing as Abby, he becomes an antagonist by the end.
Right.
But he's not even sympathetic, but like I understand why he's doing this. Like I understand why a guy who's like spent several years at war with this religious cult is like, he's not. I don't understand. Like I think he's right, but I understand like, oh yeah, it makes sense that he's just like, we just need to kill these people.
Yeah.
Like I get it. He's like rationally acting like a human. That's the problem with Kathleen, is that she's not like acting like a normal, like a character with logical motivation. She's just acting like a mouthpiece for the like her whole thing where she's like, kids dying is good, is obviously foreshadowing for the end of the game, right?
Yeah.
It's like maybe kids need to die or whatever. But it makes sense as foreshadowing, but it doesn't make sense as something a character would say. You know what I mean?
Yeah, of course. And,
like, I get the thematic point, but it's nonsense.
Yeah, and while I'm watching this is all, running in the background of my brain, but I'm still enjoying most of this stuff on a surface level. Like the sniper action bit.
Oh, that's really good. I love the reveal that he's an old man. And then that's really good.
I guess I think, like, I don't like Joel... I mean, tell me if I'm wrong, but maybe this is just after everything else that Joel's like, don't do it. I'm like, what? Were you going to have him, like, surrender and run away?
He
like,
was. That's what he says.
I guess
I
think Joel should have just shot him.
He says, leave the gun and run away. This is more of Joel being way softer way earlier in the story.
Yeah. And I think that... Craig, I keep forgetting his Masterson. Am I saying
Mazin? M-A-Z-I-N.
Craig. So I think Craig Mazin is confusing a little bit with like, well, in a video game you can just kill people, And so we've had to do, I think he's confusing that a little bit with just, some of that is just supposed to be Joel's
character.
callousness. Because in the cutscenes, he just caps people too.
Well, there's also like a weird thing like that. Okay, now that you've brought it up, I'm realizing that scene totally inconsistent with the scene in the convenience store. Because that guy is wounded and is like begging for his life. Joel does not even consider not killing him.
Yeah.
Whereas this old man, for some reason, Joel's doesn't want to, is like really, really hesitant. And then nothing happened in between those two scenes that like changed Joel as a person. So I don't get that. Like, it just feels totally inconsistent how he's characterized. I guess he's characterized whatever will make him feel morally complex.
Yeah. But, you know, it's fine. That's more of a nitpick, and the zombie action sequence is pretty good, and I mean, they pull over, you know, it's just the... I mean, you could just see, how did we get here? Because in the game, this is just another level where you're sniping zombies, and then humans come along, and you gotta snipe that. Sorry, reverse that.
Humans. You're sniping
Yep.
humans in the tank, and then zombies come out.
And so you could see all these 2 episodes written to actually have, you know, plot and, you know, a thematic point to all this. Doesn't really work, but...
Right. I also wanted to bring up something. So, episode 5, when they're in the tunnels, they get that weird side story about Ish and the little underground community from the game. Do you remember this?
Yeah, I remember.
They go there, and they see this, like, their kindergarten, which you see it's like an almost exact recreation of the location from the game. And, like, they literally have the drawings you find in the game posted on the walls. But unlike the game, it's not exactly clear what happened to the people down there. Because in the game, they're like fucking off in the sewer.
Well, they say. I mean, the zombies are underground, so we can assume. But then Fedrum cleared them up.
Right. So they say Joel speculates the solution from the game. Well, the zombies aren't in this tunnel at all.
Right.
Joel speculates the conclusion from the game, which is someone got infected and whatever. That's what happens in the game explicitly.
Yeah.
I thought it would have been I thought they were going to do this because I thought it would be a much more interesting reveal Fedra did clear out those tunnels. The people were exterminated by Fedra.
Yeah.
Like, that would be a much more interesting reveal. And I legitimately was like, oh, that's definitely what they're going to do. Why else would they say that Fedra, quote, cleared the tunnels out? And then we find out people lived in those tunnels? But they don't. And that's just weird to me.
Yeah, and it's more just like, you know, the important thing is so that Sam and Ellie can have those moments of bonding. And,
yes, and
you know, Joel and Henry can have a conversation. And
yes, but I do think... So I will say about Sam is that I think his death is played better than the game.
How so?
I actually really like the part where Ellie like cuts her hand and tries to use her blood.
See, I didn't know what to
make him immune.
I didn't even know what to make of that.
In what way?
I guess I just was like, I guess my immediate reaction was just like, that is really silly. But then I go, okay, yeah, I guess that makes sense.
It is silly
she would
because
think
she's
to do
just
that.
desperate.
Right.
She's just like, maybe this will work. Because nothing will work as far as anyone knows. So she's just like, maybe I can make him immune like I am. And I thought that was good. Like, as like like, obviously it's not going to work. But it's like just this desperate attempt is good. I like that. I like that Ellie knows he's infected instead of him just showing up as a zombie. And then like being killed.
Yeah, that's fine. And I mean... I've done a lot of bitching, but, you know, all the really important bits, just, like, between, you know, Joel and Ellie, and their, like, the pun book and all that stuff, it's like, all the important stuff is done.
Well, I want to say, I also think that bit at the end of episode 5 with Ellie and Sam, that's also a very obvious foreshadowing.
Wait, which bit?
Where she's cutting herself and putting the blood in his wound.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Well, like, that Ellie is having she has try to use her immunity to make a sacrifice of herself to save someone else. which more further implies that what Joel's going to do at the end of the show is a betrayal.
Which really makes me I wonder how they're going to handle that, and how if they're going to what parts they're going to maybe make more explicit, because the whole weird thing with the game is that even though what Joel does is reprehensible, what still kind of gets you on his side is that they just take her away and just say, Joel, yep, thank you, Joel.
They don't give her a choice either.
Yeah, and they just tell Joel, well, thanks for everything, buddy. And
we're gonna kill her.
Don't even get to say goodbye, and that's how that game strikes that balance of you. In the moment, you're probably gonna be like, yeah, fuck this. I'm gonna fucking kill these guys.
It's like, because in the game, no one gives Ellie a choice about whether to sacrifice herself to make a cure.
Yeah, so I wonder
the Fireflies
if
are just
gonna
kill. I wonder if they'll make it that she did consent to it, and then Joel just overrides it. Like, that would be interesting. Making Joel's decision. But then, because they're making a season 2 that will adapt part 2, right?
Yeah.
That ruins the backstory in part 2. Because the whole thing in part 2, in the flashbacks, is that Ellie finds out about what happened in Salt Lake City. So you can't write part 1 so that she already knows.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So it would screw up the back, like, part 2.
I mean, and who knows what...
who knows what they're going to do for part 2?
Yeah.
Which I think they've said that is going to be a straight adaptation of part 2, though.
Yeah, they have.
So
which I didn't. So and I was thinking like, so how are they going to like age Ellie? I didn't realize Bella Ramsey is 19.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and I was like, just one of those, actor like Zendaya, or it's like you can play like a high schooler until you're 37.
Yeah, one of those people but they probably would still recast her in that case.
I mean, I don't know how much you can age her up, or because she is exactly the right age, actually. But you don't want to have the problem. I thought she was like 12. Like, I thought Bella Ramsey was like fucking 12.
Yeah, you don't. Yeah, because even if she's technically the right age, you would have the weird problem of Ellie looking exactly the same, and not with nothing to indicate that she'd aged. But yeah, I mean, I guess we're gonna do another episode on the last 4 episodes.
Yeah, and even though we just spent a bunch of time bitching, I've enjoyed it.
Yeah, I found it enjoyable. I did the last 2 episodes I found less enjoyable.
But I don't think that, and that's the benefit of just the overall story is like, well, that was kind of just meh, but we're moving on.
Right, we're done. It's the advantage of being so episodic.
Yeah.
in the way the game is structured. I pulled up this article and I haven't even talked about it. It's just the same thing I was bitching about about that Polygon article where it's like...
Well, you know what? I mean, we're pretty much done, so let's go for it. What do you got?
Oh, it's just this PC Gamer article. I'm sending it to you. About how the game feels outdated, and just the part specifically where it's like... or the show feels like it's from a different time. Just specifically the part where it's like... it doesn't show a hopeful vision of a global pandemic. And it's like, you're still on that, like, we'll all come together. The pandemic will make us all come together in fucking 2023. You're still on that shit?
I mean, I can't even comprehend that mindset.
Like, yeah, it's in the first paragraph of the article, so you can see it, where it's like, it's a game that depicts a world in the wake of a deadly infection as violent and pessimistic, where people split into factions and violently fight over resources, instead of making any effort to show how communities and mutual aid contrast with that. It's like, it doesn't even explicitly say that the pandemic proved that wrong. It's just saying it's not hopeful as like a criticism in itself. It's fucking stupid. It doesn't make me feel good. Art's supposed to make me feel good.
Yeah, okay, so what about this though? What do you think of the sort of idea, I've seen this thrown around, that this sort of negativity in itself, and this sort of portrayal of the apocalypse is propaganda in the sense of like this is not how humans actually act in a disaster. And that's just what the state wants us to think.
Yeah, sure. That's right.
You know, like
that's a valid like maybe. Well,
I mean, people kind of talking about they talked about this in relation to like episode 4 and 5, which is getting more into like the politics of so if people conquered the state, they would actually be worse.
Right. But
I assume that's not what this article is grasping at.
No, because there's also... Here's the thing, though. I could easily make the Brechtian critique of happy endings, too. I could easily say that happy endings make you feel good, and you shouldn't feel good because the world sucks. So don't have catharsis. Don't release your catharsis. What I'm really getting at is that art is not a vehicle for political change, really. And that therefore criticizing art for having the wrong politics is like not really the way to go.
Yeah, sure.
That's basically it. Like, if you're like, this art, especially just being like, it's cynical, it's like as if that's inherently bad.
All right. Well, I think we're out of things to say.
Yeah. Okay, you want to talk about episodes 4 and 5 kind of together because they're...
I'm going to use the bathroom, so I'll be right back.
Okay. Well, now I have the show to myself. I'm going to turn it into a show about 70s political European film secretly. Caden, when you're listening to this, please ignore this. This is not... don't listen to me plot my coup. But I will be talking about the films of Costa Gavras. We're going to watch all the movies from when Jean-Luc Godard stopped caring about having scripts and started just screaming about Maoism in film form for 90 minutes. We're also going to watch all the old, weird-ass David Cronenberg movies he made while he was in college.
Dude, were you talking this whole time?
Yes.
Dude, I just said I was going to use the bathroom.
I know, it was a joke. I'm talking to myself. You're going to hear it on the recording.